Good morning. So glad that you are here this morning. Thank you for wearing orange. Thank you for coming and being part of Orange Shirt Sunday here at Gale. A little bit more about that later. Before we get going, I'd like to invite Darlene to come and share a little bit about what happened yesterday. The Gale Riders were out riding, raising funds for PWS&D.
As Ruben mentioned, the Gale Riders were out yesterday. The forecast was cloud with possibility of rain. God gave us some cloud, sun, and absolutely no rain. The team had a beautiful ride throughout the various areas of Elmira and actually experienced a God moment that I'd like to share with you. After coming off a trail, there was a factory building that the team had to go around, and they randomly stopped. It was not a planned stop. But right there on the side of the building was a cross. And that became a treasured God moment of affirmation for the Gale Riders. Keys and I enjoyed hosting a potluck lunch at our home afterwards, and it was a wonderful opportunity to chat with Emma from the National Church offices, who joined us for the cycling trip. And she talked to us about the ongoing work of PWS&D throughout the world. On behalf of the team, I thank you for your donations and your prayers. Our goal was $3,000. I'm happy to let you know that $2,770 has been raised, leaving $230 to make our goal. Donations can be received either online, by cash, or check until the end of this week. If you would like to do that, please contact any member of the team. The Gale Riders look forward to next year's Journey for Hope.
Thank you, Darlene, and thank you to the riders. Let's give them our recognition. Now I'm going to invite Mel to come and share about apple pies.
Good morning. So this Saturday coming up, October the 5th, is our apple picking day. Hopefully the weather holds out for us, but we will start, you can meet here at the church at 9 if you need to know how to get out to the orchard. Could use some bodies to be here to take some boxes and stuff out there as well. If not, you can meet us out at the orchard. Dress for the weather. Gloves are always good. It's wet in the grass, right? We're in trees, so kind of wear whatever you need for that. The week after, we're hoping to start our dough and pastry shell making. So on the fellowship hall, there's more specific times. We are going to send an email out to everybody this week with lots of information about it for specific times, how to sign up on Google links if you want that way, or you can sign up in the fellowship hall. Apple pie making is coming a little bit later. That information will be in the email as well. But we know some people are eager to get orders. So we have our sheets ready to go. Out in the Northex, there is the order forms here. So please just make sure you sign the master sheet of which number you're taking to take this home, start taking your orders. Note the pies are $15 this year. The board has made the decision to increase it by $1. So if anyone's asking, make sure you get that new price out as well. So we're getting into the thick of things, starting to get apple pies going for the next month here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mel. And yeah, looking forward to apple picking next Saturday. That's awesome. Just a couple updates. One, we had our fire drill last week, and we got out nice and quickly, but we did make some notes for changes. And so one of the changes, and I thought we should mention this because it's a pretty major change, is a new location. So if you see here on the screen there, the new meeting location, if we ever needed to evacuate the building, is over by the reflecting garden there at the edge of the parking lot. That'll ensure that whether it's winter or summer, we'll be able to actually still gather there rather than the sign. And we'll be out of the way of any fire trucks that are coming in. So just please note that, and as we practiced that last week. And then last, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. Today is Orange Shirt Sunday. Tomorrow is Truth and Reconciliation Day, and a holiday for some in different parts of the country. And it's also known as Orange Shirt Day, where we remember Phyllis, who an Indigenous person who wore their orange shirt to residential school, and it was taken away from her, and that's symbolic of so much that was taken away. And so we are honored here to have Michael Duke with us to share on this day about his life and the wisdom that he brings from his community. He is an Ojibwe man whose family, clan, and nation travels through time via the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation. The traditional name of his community is, if I'm saying this right, Dishkon Zibi, and meaning Antler River. Mike is a grandfather of two, father of two, an uncle, firekeeper, and helper. Mike served 5 years in the regular Canadian Armed Forces and 31 years in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. He has been supporting Crow Shield Lodge for 2 years and is the manager of operations for White Owl Native Ancestry Association in Kitchener. And so, Mike, we are really pleased, honored that you are here today. Thank you for coming. Mike will share in a little moment here, but for now, I invite you to stand for our call to worship, which comes from the Healing and Reconciliation Resource. I invite you to stand. Yes, yeah. Comes from the Healing and Reconciliation Resource, One in the Spirit, and so it says, it is appropriate when Indigenous people begin any gathering or sacred ceremony to offer thanks to the one who has created us all, the giver of life. As we come together here today in worship, God, let us open our hearts and minds to a different way of prayer. And so we're going to begin by looking to the east where the sun rises. And so, yeah, at the back there. There we go. Yeah. There we go. Creator, we offer you thanks for that time in our life which we know as infancy, for the hope of resurrection and for new beginnings. We also offer thanks for the teachings of honesty and truth. Now we're going to look to the south. God, we offer you thanks for that time in our lives which we call adolescence, and for all those times of learning and growing that you bring to us throughout our lives. We also offer you thanks for the gifts of caring and sharing. And now we'll look to the west, the place of the setting sun. Great Spirit, we offer you thanks for the time in our lives which we call adulthood, and for the ability to take all we know from you and live right. We offer thanks for the gift of faith and the teaching of respect for all. Next, we look to the north, the cool, refreshing breath of the Spirit of God. We thank you, Holy Spirit, for our elders and the gift of wisdom. We thank you for clarity of vision and the sense of the strength that comes from you. We need that to live each day. We also offer you thanks for the teaching of kindness that comes from this direction. We focus our thoughts upwards now, beyond the ceiling of this sanctuary. O great Spirit, in the day's sky's infinite blue and the vast blackness of the night sky sprinkled with stars too numerous to count, remind us that you are beyond our ability to know you or to tell others about you, but that you also are no further away from us than the air we breathe. I invite you to look down at your feet now. O great Spirit, help us to give thanks unceasingly for the bounty provided to us from our sacred earth. From that sacred earth we come, to that sacred earth we will return. Without our sacred earth, we would not live. Now I invite us all to sort of turn towards the center as we finish our prayer. We give thanks to you, God, Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer of all life, and we look to Jesus, who is the head of the church, to lead us as we forge ahead, working together, Indigenous and settler peoples, toward healing and reconciliation with each other and with you. Let us worship God by singing "Gather Us In." And let us come to God in prayer. The responses will be up on the screen. Jesus called us to be open to the gifts of change that surround us. Great Spirit, we can feel and see the change as the seasons bring their warmth and acceptance. Lord, help us to be respectful of the spirituality of our Indigenous brothers and sisters. Great Spirit, help us to walk together with all your children, to recognize your gifts of creation, and to learn the lessons that creation has for us. Lord, help us to be more like you, and to remember your Son in everything that we say and do. God, you have sent the Holy Spirit so all humans can call out, "We are children of the promise." The promise from you is for abundant life, peaceful living, and being together in a good and compassionate way. God has freed us all so that we might enjoy life and live together with all nations in peace. Amen. And our prayer of confession. Lord, you have heard the persistent sound of Indigenous people crying. You are angered by the injustice done to them every day. If our hands are stained with injustice, God, forgive us, save us, rescue us. Encourage Indigenous people, encourage our church. Help us find new ways to walk together in peace as your children. Amen. The good news of Jesus Christ is that we are forgiven, that we are led into paths of peace by walking in his way. Amen. I'm going to now invite Mike to come forward and share with us this morning. Thank you, Mike.
Okay. I guess I'll put my water down here. Minugajeb, Nindawe Maganadok, Shasha Benes and Dishnakaz, Makwa Dodem, Dishkan Zibi in Dunjba, Ojibwe Anishinabe and Dal. In my greeting that I just gave you in that language is something that I had to learn, but I learned later in life. And I'll translate that for you today. Nindawe Maganadok. That is acknowledging all of our relations. The relations that come with me, with you, your grander family relations, those ancestors and relations and that spirit that travels with you, and however you identify with that, I acknowledge that. Shasha Benes and Dishnakaz. That is my spirit name. It's a name that comes in ceremony. And I'll get into a little bit about that as I share today. Shasha Benes is translated into the fishhawk, that gray and black fishhawk. The osprey is an English word for it. But in a spiritual context, in my way, the Anishinaabe Medewin, old Anishinaabe Medewin, it means that spirit that moves among this world and the spirit world. Makwa Dodem is a bear clan. It is my family line that travels through our matrilineal lines. Other nations have family clans that through the family, their mother's lines. In Anishinaabe, comes through the father's lines. I'm Bear Clan. There are 5 original clans in the Anishinaabe culture, and the Bear Clan has a responsibility of collecting medicine, protecting, healing, and I'm still learning to be kinder with myself as I learn that It's been a tough road for me to learn. Dishkan, Zibi, and Dunjba. That's the Chippewas of the Thames First Nations. It's just southwest of London, along the Thames River. And we've started using our traditional name as Antler River because of the abundance of deer. And I don't know if there's any hunters in your congregation, but you know, if you're harvesting apples, maybe you could do a little deer hunting too, because I know there's lots of deer around here. You know, they're always good feasts. So a little bit about my story. Before I get into that, I just want to thank your congregation for reaching out to Crow Shield Lodge, to have us, invite us in to share a little bit about my journey at Crow Shield Lodge, and to engage and provide an opportunity for a safe conversation about reconciliation, about truth, about these orange shirts that we are wearing today. I want to say Chimagwedge for doing that. Mine is dirty from yesterday. I was out singing at a powwow at the University of Waterloo, and as we heard earlier, the weather changed, and it was a warm one. A little bit about myself. I'll just share so that you know who I am. I'm 56 years old, and I'll share a bit of a story that started late summer in 1967, where my mother, who was 15 at the time, was a ward of the court. As we are aware, the ramifications on my people through colonization and the belief in the state that they were doing the right thing sent my ancestors off to residential school. With that belief, I truly believe it wasn't ill-intended, but it did have negative impacts on my nation. As a result of not having a connection to language and culture and family, our families became dysfunctional, poverty-stricken in a land in which we, at one point, had free use to support and build a community. And as a result, my mother was taken into care by the Crown and sent off to a jail for girls, is what it was, just down in Galt, a place called the Grandview Training School. After going through upwards to 25 different foster homes, abusive situations. And late in the summer of 1967, as abuses as you can, there's stories of what has taken place down at Grandview Training School. She ran away, ran back home to the reserve, didn't really have a connection to community, and at that young age, in a rendezvous with my father, I started my journey. And in April 1968, just before I was to be born, my mother returned to that training school where I was born. And I was forcefully put into care, and she was forced to sign adoption papers. And I was adopted into a non-native family in Kitchener. And Kitchener is where I stayed until 1988. And I grew up with a non-native family. Wonderful people. Did their best to share with me what they knew. They could not afford me those lessons of my culture and my language and my people. Growing up, I always knew I was different. All it'd take was a picture taken of me and my friends in the neighborhood in about July, and you could see my skin contrast was a marked difference from my friends. But what I also learned is that people are good people. Although we tease one another about being a little bit different, in the end we just wanted to ride bikes, go catch frogs and snakes as a little kid. And growing up, as we get older, we start taking on different biases and views, that brought on. And then I grew up into public school in Kitchener, and I had to deal with racism, not knowing why and not knowing the history of it. And it was a tough battle for me. I had to grow up tough. I would be in grade 4, and the boys in grade 8 would want to pick on me, and I'd have to fight them. There wasn't a time where you could say this person's picking on me. That didn't happen in schools those days. It's a little bit different nowadays, and I'm very happy to see that. But one thing I did remember is that in riding bicycles and everything else, I took to athletics like crazy. I love team sports, and I love physical sports. I played lacrosse, I played football, I played rugby, and I played those sports right up until my body gave out about 15 years ago, and I can hear my knees making noise as I climb the stairs, and I'm thankful for those days, but now I'm paying for the price when it starts to get cold. But one of the things I was learning as I was growing up in high school is I didn't know who I was. When I was in senior public school in grade 7, suddenly I'm taking history, and I've got this conservative guy who just loved Joe Clark. I don't know if you remember Joe Clark, but at the time he was a prime minister, and this guy is very conservative. And he would point out Native people this and Native people that, and Mike, what nation are you from? And I had no idea. I'm Native, that's all I know. I remember my parents, in their best way, took me to the Royal Ontario Museum and pointed at an exhibit and said, "There's your people." How do you respond to that as a young man? I want to ride bikes and I want to look at the dinosaur bones. That doesn't mean anything to me. But when I look back, I said, that's the best that they could do. And they loved me. So in grade 7, I said, I've had enough of this guy calling me out. In history, in the Canadian history I was learning, they talked about the War of 1812 and the Crown's relationship with the people of the Longhouse. And I said, those Mohawk guys always seem pretty cool. They're pretty tough, and I like that sort of thing. So I told people I was Mohawk. Yeah. So that put everything at bay, right? There was no other people around me who were even Mohawk to start asking these questions. Until I was 16. When I was 16, suddenly there's a little owner's manual, I call it, a little information package that my parents got when they adopted me. And he said, at some point, I might be eligible to get a status card. I don't know what that was. I don't even remember getting my picture taken. But suddenly, one time, it took a while to happen, and I was just turned 18. My parents presented me with a little card. Well, I'll show you what it looks like nowadays. It's not a little card. It's all fancy now. Well, that's my visa. That gets doors open, too. And in this little card here is a certificate of Indian status. And what this means is that the government is satisfied that they can trace my family lineage back to a signatory of a treaty of peace with the Crown. So we are part of the Longwoods Treaty, which is down by down the Thames River. And suddenly, I look at the back of my card, and it says, Chippewas of the Thames. I said, I'm not Mohawk after all. What the heck? It changes everything. Well, it didn't really change much, because the extent of me being Mohawk was when I was playing football, I cut my hair down the middle. But I remember I was sitting with my friend, and there was a cute girl that I always used to smile and get silly around, who went to St. Mary's High School. I went to Cameron Heights, and she's Native. And I said, hey, look at this. I said, I'm not Mohawk. I'm from the Chippewas of the Thames. And I wasn't even saying it right. And she looks at me, and she just swats me right across the back of the shoulder. She says, oh, my God, you're from my mom's res. We use that reserve res. That's short form. I said, it doesn't mean anything to me, right? I have no idea. The Thames, I looked it up, and Chippewyans are from up Northwest Territories, the Dene. I didn't know about this group. He said, yeah, you're from my mom's reserve. Okay. And she looks again. She says, our birthdays are 4 months apart. I said, "Oh, what does that mean?" And she says, "Well, your mom and my mom are pregnant on the same reserve at the same time, and they will know each other." So suddenly, I'm down at a meeting. I'm sitting down at a kitchen table with Debbie and Kenny, and we're talking about the res, and it's completely foreign to me. Wow, I got a reserve, I got a community. So we make a decision, we're going to figure it out. My birth certificate original is sealed. I have an adoption certificate, which my birth name at the time was Michael Edward, and whoever did it put a little piece of tape over the family name. So I peeled that off. Last name is Weeks, Weekes. Doesn't mean anything to me, but sure did to Debbie. She said, "I know that family." So fast forward a couple of years later, I'm now married. I have a daughter. And we go down to the Chippewa of the Thames powwow, and we're going to go door knocking. By this time, I was in the Army. And I had a soldier's mentality. And we're door knocking, and on the west part of the reserve, there's an area called Bear Creek. And that's where my family settled. They lived in a community a little bit further west, a nice farming community now, but were forcibly removed off that land. And where they settled, they called it Bear Creek. And that's where the Weeks family are sitting. And we started door knocking. And the little Dorothy Weeks, about this tall, takes a look in my ear, and she looks at my face and, "Come on in." And next thing you know, she's calling all her daughters in. We at that point don't know who my mother is. Because I think we got another one showing up at the door, and it's common. Someone's making their way back, and she's opening up the photo albums and taking pictures of all of us. And she said, "You're part of this family. We don't know who your mother is, but until you do, you're here," which was nice. And I would visit Dorothy all the time, and she would have like a whole gang full of grandkids running around playing in this little turtle pool full of grass and bugs, and nobody cared, just having a good old time. But I go door knocking, and I leave my name and number with all kinds of people, and I go to the registration office, and I leave my number. I said, "I know you can't do anything, but if it should make its way somewhere to someone, I won't ask questions." And it does. Suddenly, 4 years later, the next step is I get a phone call. "I got your number from, and I heard that you're looking for your mother." And it is my mother, Sharon, over the phone. First time hearing her voice. So we make plans. At this point, I left the Army and I joined the Mounted Police, and I was in Nova Scotia. And my family situation was such that I didn't have a lot of time to go and visit. Eventually, I did. I found my biological mother. That was about 1999, 2000, about that time. And I was, being a veteran, I started singing powwow. I brought Mushum with me today. I'm going to open him up a little bit. And as a result, I'm hanging out with the veterans. It's like going to the Legion on Remembrance Day. The veterans like to tell stories. They've done their time, and I do the same thing. And we have powwows. The veterans are always held out in a good way and honored. And there was a guy named Reg Albert who I knew. Well, Reg was my height, leader, ran the Veterans Association, and I would see him from time to time. I always have a little visit. And later on, my mother tells me, through her own healing, who my biological father is. And she says, "It's Reg Albert." I said, I know Reg. I've known him for 10 years. I run into him at the Chippewa of the Thames Pound. No, this is in Toronto. And at this time, he's getting old and he's pushing a walker. And as a veteran, he would get someone to tape a flag to his walker, and he was still going right up to the very end. And I told him, I had a conversation with him. I said, Reg, you don't have to say anything. But you know someone named Little Sharon? Yeah, would that happen to be around 1967? Because, well, good thing he was hanging on that walker, because the look on his face was amazing. What? I said, yeah, you probably didn't know. It's okay. But I was wearing my red tunic. I was still am a very proud RCMP officer. And he says, he grabs his wife's, here, take a picture of us. And he passed shortly thereafter. So I had the moment to meet him. Fast forward, again, my next step in this story is I run into Debbie. In 2022, I'm coming out of a powwow down by Chippewa. And as I'm walking out, it's dark, and I see Debbie sitting with a bunch of the elders that I know. And I said, look, there's my favorite people in the world. And whenever I see the elders, I'll sit down and have a conversation and share a little story. And I don't know why I never reached out, because she was so integral in reaching out and doing the door knocking the first time. And I lean in and I said, Debbie, I found out who my father was. And I tell her. And she looks at me and she, oh my God. And she smiles. She goes, I can see it. And she leans in real quiet. She says, a lot of people don't know this, but my biological father is Reg Albert. Yeah. How far I was and how close I was my whole life. Having those family connections now allows for a solid community and family understanding. And there are still people today in this world who, through residential schools, forced adoption, loss of culture, are lost and they cannot connect and are desperately clinging to a little bit of a connection that they can't actually find. And I'm thankful that that young lady who was from St. Mary's High School turned me down many, many times, because it turns out I'm her uncle. So yes, very lovely, very lovely. But that's my journey so far, just so you understand a little bit about me. I served 5 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. In that time, it was during the Persian Gulf. I was all ready to go over, and they went over for 6 months, and I didn't go. And I was upset at the time, and I was thankful that I didn't, now that I look back in life. I joined the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in 1993. But before I joined the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, a little something happened, and the Army was involved. They referred to it commonly as the Oka crisis, where the town of Oka started encroaching upon some territory, and the Mohawks, very cool people, I know a lot of them, said, no, you're not doing it. Sadly, lives were lost, people were hurt, and the Army was called in. And that brought to the surface an incredible amount of bias and racism that was always hidden in the Army. People didn't say too much around me because I would call them out. We used to have this little game called the European handball, in which all disputes were handled in a physical way in athletics. Nobody was hurt, but it was established about if you had a beef with somebody, that's the way you did it. After school by the bike racks, we're sorting this out. I think it still happens in the Army, not so much anymore. But suddenly it was all coming out. I said, oh, thank God I'm getting out. Thank God I joined the Mounted Police. Then I learned with the Mounted Police that the Mounted Police is the fourth branch of the Canadian Armed Forces, still being managed by the federal government, and I am now under the care of Veterans Affairs Canada, and I have a pension. And I worked 27 years as a regular officer until I was in the May long weekend in 2018. I was working in a community called Little Grand Rapids, an Anishinaabe community with no road access in the southwestern part of Manitoba. I don't know if you've ever been to a community where you can only fly in, but it's you got to realize you have to be self-sufficient. Well, a forest fire started that weekend by a couple of jabronis who decided to go out and start a fire and go fishing, and it surrounded the community. And we had water bombers flying over our community just to keep us safe. We lost a few houses there, but it was 3 days solid. And what that ended up doing for me is it brought everything that I had accumulated through my years of service with Canada to the surface. And I would say it pushed my cheese right off my cracker. And I had to realize that I reached out for all the supports that I could to help me deal with all these things that I've seen and experienced. And I left the RCMP and I for 6 months, and I dealt with my PTSD. But I'm now a reservist, so that means I work part-time. In the last couple of years, I started working with Crow Shield Lodge in their efforts for healing and reconciliation, engagement with the greater community, and also engagement with my people. And opportunities like this come up to speak with you lovely people, and I hope that we're going to have a dialogue. So that's my story, and I just want to make sure that I don't go over time, okay? You got lots of time. Okay, I'll keep talking as long as I got some water, but I don't want you guys to fall asleep here. So a little bit about myself. I brought Mushum. I am a powwow singer, and I've been doing that for 25 years. Something that I enjoy. I also attend ceremonies, sweat lodges, naming ceremonies, and it is a way of life for me. And I want to share something as I'm going through. I brought a reading. Where did I put my book? There it is. All right. Now, we don't have a testament such as the Bible, but our spiritual practices are handed down orally. And there's something that I want to share that I think is very poignant, that I learned from an elder, Badweadun Ba, Eddie Benton, when I was in ceremony. And he shared with me and the whole congregation, of course he shared it with me because I was there, because he was only speaking with me. There was a group of people in the lodge, and that every creation story is true. That hasn't always been the case. If you look back in history, those people who came from Europe were fleeing due to some religious prosecution or whatever it might be. And I think that's fascinating, because and then all of a sudden that colonization, that empire building starts happening, and then as my ancestors, we get subjugated to the same restrictions, played a game that we had no experience with. And I'd like to bring you back that as a congregation in the Presbyterian Church, which I'll have you know that I have a connection with. Tom Schreider, my father-in-law, was big in the Presbyterian Church down in St. Andrews in Kitchener, encouraged the baptism of my children, and both of my children were baptized in the Presbyterian Church, one in St. Andrews and another one down in Nova Scotia. It was a small congregation. And that's my connection with the Presbyterian Church. Good folks. And I was always welcome to go. So I just, and reading the apology that was just shared with me by your church leaders, I took a few moments with that, to sit with that. It was very detailed. And I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for that. It is a weight. It is a weight that everyone carries. But it doesn't have to be heavy. We can acknowledge it. We can look back in the history of of structured religions and everything else, it comes down to, in my view, that statement that every creation story is real. There are times when you have that God moment when you're out riding your bikes. There's a times when you can be by yourself and sitting at a fire. This time of year, it's nice and cool, the bugs aren't out, and if you set a fire and grab your nice comfortable coat and blanket, you sit with a fire in the evening, suddenly you're having that conversation with God. That is our relationship as Anishinaabe. Use the book as a guide. We have our teachings. And this is one that was written by Basil Johnson, which I think is very poignant. I wanted to share with you. I can put my reading glasses on, 56. I can't read that print for that far away. The vision of Gitche Manado. Gitche Manado. Gitche means the big and the spirit, but it also translates into the one that created everything. And this is written, it's called Creation. It's in English, so bear with me. Young and old asked, who gave me the breath of life, my frame of flesh? Who gave me the beat of heart, my vision to behold? Who? When to rose the gift of shade of beauty and grace from them, when to pine the gift of mystery or growth and the power to heal, when? How to bear the gift of sense of time, a place of wintering. How to eagle came the gift of glance of love, the flash of rage, how? Who gave to sun? Who gave to the sun? His light to burn, his path to read. Who gave to earth her greening bounty, cycles of being? Who? Who gave to us the gifts we do not own, but borrow and pass on? Who made us one? Who set the path of souls? Who carved the land of peace? Who? And that who is all within you. It's your relationship with God, your relationship with Creator, your relationship with Gitche Manado. We are but souls in a body with a gift of time, passing through this universe, passing through this world. And for this little moment, we share this space together, and I want to thank you for that. I'd like to share a smudge, and where's Keys? There you are. Okay, Keys has agreed to help me with this, and I'm going to continue to talk as we're going through, but I just want to introduce to you Mushum. Now, I just want to also acknowledge that there was a time in which this was illegal. So in my drum group, we call ourselves Red Tail. We refer to our drum as Mushum, and Mushum was brought forward in ceremony. A pipe was smoked, and we brought this to life in ceremony. And every now and again, Mushum gets to travel with me. And this morning, I was sitting down having coffee and just reflecting on what's been happening in my life and where I was going today. And we don't leave Mushum sitting out in the car by himself. And when he comes into the house, I bring him in and sit him on the sofa, and I take the blanket off him, let him put on his shows, whatever he wants. And so he's a Netflix guy right now, so he has to watch kid shows with his other family members. But there was a time that this was illegal. This wouldn't have been allowed. And given some of the natures of the churches, we'd be chased out of certain areas. This all had to go back into the bush and hidden for a very long time. Could you imagine that? if you could not openly worship, practice your faith. That time is still remembered by the elders in my community, who do not come out. They're very private about it. They still have that suspicion. And I'm going to be passing around a smudge with the help of keys, and I'm just going to share a little bit. So as I'm doing this, if you just want to cut the camera, please, and no pictures for this part. What this is a ceremonial cleansing, physical cleansing, that I can equate it to wiping off your feet and taking off your outside clothes when you come into your house. Whether you're doing chores in the barn, sometimes you just want to leave that stuff over there, right? Well, this is what we do. In my circles, we smudge. We do this ourselves. We do it when we come together. And as I'm going to share a little bit of my beliefs, I'd like to share this smudge with you. And this is very special, okay? All right, this is a sage, Mushkodawish, and this was grown down in Wilmot Township. Little fun fact, Clarence Katchigi, who started Crow Shield, was adopted into a Mennonite family, and still works like a farmer, of course. It never stops with that guy. But he supports a garden where medicine is grown. So I'm going to start with this. And Keys, if you want to come up, please. So what we do is we take the leaves off, and it has a bit of a sharp odor to it when it's smoldering. We're going to keep it to a minimum. And I want you to know that it is completely voluntary. You don't have to. So we just take the leaves and we're just going to crumple up just a small little ball, Keys. Just come over here and take a look like this. Okay. Just hold on to that. We'll just... That's a fumble. All right. Excuse me. We worked this out before. Yeah. So I'm looking for my sacred Bic. All right. So we just crumple that up just a little bit like so. And I'm just going to light it. So in the ceremonial smudging, we're going to wash this smoke over our bodies. And this is a nice way to do it. We did cleanse our eyes of what we've seen, breathe it in, put it over our bodies, our shoulders, into our heart, so that we can speak kind words and listen. And just wash it over the body. And what I do also is I will smudge our items. So a Muslim gets a smudge. Before I do that, I smudge myself, right? You know, it's like when the oxygen mask comes down in the airplane, they always say to you, put your mask on first before you help kids. And for you, please feel free to smudge yourself. Very good. You hang on to this. And however you want to, we'll put that in your hand, and you hang on to that there, and when it starts to go down, just give it a little fan, and however you want to pass through the congregation. There's no wrong way to do it, folks. If you don't want to do it, you can just pass. And please stand when you do it. All right, that's my back pocket there. Yeah, like I shared before, this is a moment. I don't know, a show of hands, who's smudged before? A few, yeah. This is a practice that you could do yourself if you wanted to. The sage is available to purchase. There's a place down in Six Nations called Iro Crafts, IRO Crafts, and they sell all kinds of wonderful things to buy, to smudge with, and medicine and books and crafts, and it's the superstore for us. When always make new friends when we go to Iro Crafts, and we contemplate about how much money we end up spending more and beyond our budget. It's like going to Costco. I only went down for a few things, and I come back and, well, I have to pay the rest on my credit card. As we're going through, I'd like to share a little bit about Anishinaabe culture. Anishinaabe culture, our relationship is with the earth, the land, and all of creation. We've been given instructions that of all the creatures in the world, it is Anishinaabe, us, people, and I include you in that, is that we're the only ones that have been given free will. The freedom to choose and decide how we go about life, how we interact with one another. And in the stories that are related to me, I am taught of a time in which the Anishinaabe were living close to salt water, and that there were people coming, and that we were to move away, and that we moved away from salt water. In the contemporary references is down the St. Lawrence River, Lake Ontario, up the Ottawa River, all the way through the Great Lakes into Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Minnesota, the Dakotas, Michigan, and Ohio. And this is where we landed. And our families are spread out all the way back to the east, centralized in the Great Lakes area, and through time have moved on to grander areas of the Rocky Mountains and all the way down into Mexico. That our people have been displaced and moved off of our traditional territory through a relationship of treaty with the Crown. And that relationship got to the point in which there was a strong arm of the Crown, known as the RCMP and the Indian agents, who made it illegal to practice our faith. And that we continue to grow and hide our ceremonies back in the bush. But we're always around. There was an experience that I had. Oh, we need a reload? Okay, very good. We're doing great, Keys. Thanks.
We're two great people right here.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, you have the lighter?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead. And just give a little, it'll go out. There you go, that's plenty. Or just leave that here. That our people are displaced and finding our way. That it's come through a number of national commissions and studies and judicial reviews of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the Commission on Truth and Reconciliation, in which we're recognizing that we're on a journey to build stronger relationships together. And it's a tough one to navigate, to have those hard conversations, to be in a position where We're occupying and sitting on land. We're paying tax on land to a government entity where the land was taken by the crown for dollars. And to even recognize, the ancestors who are on here beforehand. And you talk about the neutral people, the Longhouse people who are here, the Haudenosaunee who were granted a tract of land on 6 miles each side of the Grand River, based on the relationship of the Longhouse people during the American Revolution. And the Anishinaabe, we were here as well. And now you find folks are here as well. And if I could instill anything here at this moment about having a responsibility to the land, is to be kind. Be kind to the land, be kind to the waters, be kind to one another, and be kind to strangers who are passing through. Because we are but given a small period of time to loan us to travel through and be here on this earth. And there are moments like this in which we get to share with one another. Share a smudge. Share a story. Introduce you to Mushum. And I could continue to talk here, but I wanted to open it up to maybe a question or two that maybe somebody might have. Is there a question that you've always wanted to ask a native, but you're always afraid to do so? What's the secret handshake? What's your recipe for fry bread? It is always a secret, that sort of thing. And there are certain things that we do and we share like this. This is okay what we share. If there's things that I'm not permitted to share that we hold that back, I won't. And so there's no wrong question, and don't worry about even asking it in a good way. If it's coming from your heart and you're worried about the language you're going to use, please speak plainly. And there was a hand back here.
Is it okay to smudge if you're not Indigenous?
Absolutely, yes. That's what it is okay. It is okay. It is a practice in which you can do yourself, even if you're going to sit down and like even sitting at a fire, and you want to sit down and have a moment just to ground, to do that. Absolutely. I've been to ceremonies, a Sundance ceremony out in Manitoba, and the Sundance chief, Dave Crushane Jr., who's passed, got up and spoke about us sharing our ceremonies. And there are moments when you get to participate. And that's okay. It's an honor to participate. But one thing I would like to share also is that I'm sharing this as part of my culture. The last thing I would like to see is that somebody is doing this in marketing and having a business. And that brings me on to, okay, we just, right here. Thank you. We've gone through? Okay. There was a time in which being Native, people weren't proud of that. And the Royal Commission and the Truth and Reconciliation came up with some recommendations. And I hope you've all had an opportunity to take a look at that and find out where there's some space for you to work towards that. But keep it in the context of truth. And you can start by way of a simple of acknowledgement of where you are. How to place yourself in time. And in the area of reconciliation, yes, this is your congregation and it has reached out to have a conversation together. So I want to commend each and every one of you for that, and those who are in the church's leadership and the board and has come forward. And Padre, thank you very much for the opportunity to come up. It is a welcome change for me. because I work in spaces in which it's not so welcoming, where it is a great deal of resistance. Because when it comes to truth and reconciliation on, I refer to our part, is that we're still fighting for nothing for us without us. Fine folks want to do their part, but you got to check off boxes and put it through this area. We were, and we still hold ourselves out as sovereign nations, sovereign people who have to take ownership and lead this charge of reconciliation and healing on our own. If you have an opportunity in spaces to talk about what the natives are doing now, talk about like another protest, another demonstration, another space, have an understanding of the history of what's going on behind, not just the current inconvenience because you got to navigate a protest down in Caledonia or wherever that might be. How bad does the situation have to be for a group of people to get up and do that and say enough is enough? Do we have to inconvenience everyone around you just to listen? You can demonstrate and do all you want, but we still look at on the business end of the crown. I still see Oka. I can close my eyes and I can still see Oka. I see Ipperwash. I see Ipperwash just down the road. Dudley George killed by the OPP. It happens. Cries for help. My people getting killed by police officers who are there for a well-being check. I get worried about the Padre, and I said, yeah, somebody should go take a look at him. The police show up. Next thing you know, Padre's been killed by the police. That's a hard conversation to have when I wear the uniform. I have to acknowledge the history of the RCMP every time I put that on. And those peers that I work with, I educate them on the history of that. That they might not have a biased bone in their body, but that uniform that they put on represents a colonial violence against my people. That's a really tough line to walk. And at the end of every day, when I was done, I always realized I wear the uniform, but I did not do harm. That where I was working, it was something that needed to be done. And I always made it a point to go back and make friends. Be peaceful about it. Because who knows, maybe there'll be a fire around the community, and I need that person to help navigate a lake at night because I don't know my way around. Okay, and any more questions? Yes?
Well, you talked about not knowing who you were,
Yeah.
and then you found out who you were because you got connected to people who knew. So how did they, the elders, etc., maintain their knowledge of the history of your people?
That is an excellent question. Now there's a name for that, which I've been told. In every family, there is someone who is responsible for the backstory of family genetics and ailments. And in the traditional setting, that person would have that story and would be able to understand and recognize. So when I first met Dorothy, she brought in those ladies to have that conversation, and they welcomed me. The simple fact that, yes, you're part of this family. We don't know exactly how, but we can tell. And you could tell if you run into family, where people have got the same face as you do. It happens. So I was accepted. And then I found my biological family, and more was accepted. To the point where I'm adopted. This is another fun story, another layer, because I love interrelation stuff, and a bit of my analytical mind from law enforcement is I'm always looking at connections. My daughter, Jessica, meets a young man at University of Western Ontario who happens to be Mohawk. Like him already, right? Because we love the Mohawks. Yeah, Taylor, nice young man. I retire from the RCMP, and but by the time I get my own place, I'm staying with her for a little bit because I helped her get into her little condo, so I got a little bedroom. We're sitting down watching Family Guy or something, to make me smarter by the day. But phone rings, and she looks at her phone, and next thing you know, she pads off on her tiptoes and runs to her bedroom and says, "Oh, there's a boy." Taylor. They start a relationship. But she's a smart young lady. She said, we need to know one another for a year before we get into a relationship. So they are friends for a year. And as they get into a relationship, she really likes this boy. And I said, oh yeah, tell me about his family. Well, his dad's Mohawk from Oswego, Six Nations. Big into athletics. He's an engineer. He's an entrepreneur. And his mom's from Chippewa, my reserve. Her reserve goes by the name of Katie. Well, now, she's present to some of these backstories, right? We had to go back and start talking to the aunties and all these families to find out how far back the Weeks and the Alberts come in with the Katies. And fortunately, the Katies are a small family who came up from down Detroit, Michigan way. So we didn't find where there was any crossing. We didn't have any issues with the clan system, let's put it that way. Because that's something we need to be cautious of. But we were accepted. It is our community. And as our community and as my family, we go in and we maintain a relationship. There are people out there who have gotten to the point where they want to have that relationship, and being Native, First Nations, is now cool. There are people who are saying that they're Native when they're not. It's okay to ask a question. Where are you from? Who are your people? People who don't know will say, I don't know, I was adopted out, but I know I'm Native. Okay. But there are people out there who will claim an ancestor from 6 generations ago and have no connection to their community, who claim that they're Native. It's sad for us to see when they might not have experienced that bias, that racism, that marginalization in a community. And we are having those difficult conversations. I've joined a men's fraternity, and I've heard that people were claiming that they were, and I went and had a conversation with them, and it turns out it's not factual. And I did, with kindness, ask them to stop, because it's harmful. I don't know what the threshold is or how many times you got to watch Dances with Wolves to claim to be Native, but it gets to be that point where a lot of people will study and read books and they'll identify. Sure, identify with our spiritual concepts. That's okay. Feel free to use them. Don't market yourself. Don't go out doing that. Share with your friends. Right? Don't pretend to be someone you're not. Be true to yourself. Because I still own that 4-year period where I claim to be Mohawk. And I'll carry that for the rest of my life. Because I don't think the Mohawks were happy about it. I'm a pretty cool guy, though, if they really got to know me. Are there any more questions? Yes?
I don't know quite how to word it, but I want to start off by saying I'm sorry for what happened.
Okay.
I vividly remember dying from emotion. I think 9 years ago, my daughter got out of the car after school and started talking about the girl with the orange shirt. And I remember stopping to
Thank you.
Sorry, just wondering, I didn't plan to get emotional, but just wondering, like, what else I could do to help, like, with the reconciliation.
What else can you do to help? Yes. Well, first, thank you for speaking through that real hard truth. That's the big thing right there. You get that catch, right? Because you feel that. Think about what was happening with the residential schools during COVID, and they're starting to scan the land, and they're finding all these, well, air quotes, anomalies. The story's already changing, something that we as a people always knew, that people were lost. People died. There was vicious harms done to us. Medical experiments. Well, let's take a look at nutrition. Let's see how much Native people can go on, how many calories a day and still not die. Yes, that happened. 215 was the first one, right? Remember that? I think that's where a lot of people who had some family history started to reconnect. Yes, I know what that feels like. I'm sort of connected that way. In an extended way. But how can you help on every day? One is to acknowledge it, which you have. Another one is to talk about it. If you have time to volunteer, there's a number of organizations, Crow Shield being one, of Native organizations in the area, where you can become involved and you can support by volunteering some of your time. There's always a time and place you can do it. If you felt that you could donate, Crow Shield is a charitable, has charitable status. So if you're looking for $50,000, $60,000 to get a receipt for, they'll take it. Maybe Clarence might give me a cup of coffee for that one if I connected you guys with that. He'd be very helpful. He could really put out some programs. But I think for the most part is acknowledging that message came from your daughter. I didn't learn about it in school. I learned about the War of 1812, and how Canada came to be at the time, right? Learned about residential schools later in life. I knew I was adopted and didn't know it was called the 60 Scoop until I started meeting a whole bunch of people. Oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of us out there. I've taken my daughter down to a soccer game in London. She played rep soccer in Waterloo, and of course we're driving all over the province for matches, and we're traveling through Tavistock and through the back way and rolling to Timmy's there, and I'm waiting in line, and some Mennonites came in and I look, and as they were coming in, and I look, and I said, "Hey, that's a Native woman under that bonnet." And I look, and I said, "How'd you get there? I got to go to a soccer match. I really want to talk to you. How did you get there? Were you adopted out? Did you marry in? Did you convert?" Mennonites are great people. I brought both my kids up to Woolwich Township to play hockey. I ran into a bunch of folks who I coached in football, and I'd love coming up to Woolwich. I'm familiar with the arenas up here and the folks who played hockey in the area. And my daughter played rep hockey for Woolwich. And when we had practice in the old Elmira arena, before the new one came up, right after their practice, they used to have church league hockey. So the Hawksville Hawks was playing another church, and I had never seen rough hockey like that except on the reserve. They were just chopping and slicing one another up. And Brent Barrage, her head coach, says, "Look up, ladies, look at this. We call this arts and crafts up here." And they would spend time on how to goon up one another. And I'm not telling you, these Elmira girls, they would just carve up people. I said, "Oh, I still get misty when I think about it. They're just such strong women." Any more questions for me? Well, I will be available afterwards. I'm going to stick around. I'll probably be the last one to leave today. Today is a wonderful day for me. Tomorrow, there's going to be a couple of events that you might want to take a look at to attend if you had the space to be able to do that. In Kitchener and on Frederick Street, there's a place called the Healing of the Seven Generations, and they're doing a walk from that location down to the tower in Victoria Park, Willow River Park they call it now. I don't know who canceled Queen Victoria. They have, but it's still referred to as Victoria Park. And there's another one in Cambridge. It's a bit of a haul for you to get down to Cambridge, but if you just had a moment to recognize the day tomorrow, think about that. There's always moments when that happens. And I want to thank you for your attentiveness, your kindness, and your open heart, and welcoming me into your space today. It was greatly appreciated, and I say Chimagwedge.
You stay here, I pray for you.
Okay.
Let me take a moment just to pray for Mike and for the work of Crow Shield Lodge. Let's pray. Creator God, we thank you for this time that we have come together to work for truth and reconciliation and for healing. And we thank you for Mike and for what he has shared with us today, for sharing his spirituality, his life story, and his deep care and kindness for this community and for the work that he is doing. We ask that you would bless him, that you would bless the work of Crow Shield Lodge, that you'd bless the work of this congregation towards healing and reconciliation, that together we would form new bonds and new relationships of kindness and care and peace and truth. And so, God, as we continue this work together, we ask that you would guide us and that we would be leaders and allies towards truth and reconciliation in Canada. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen. Thank you, sir. Why don't we close with a hymn? We're going to sing Like a Healing Stream. And the song reminds me, each verse talks about water and just a little bit, and then more and more. And I think that in a lot of ways is where we need to go in terms of healing and reconciliation. It just takes one person at a time. But as those drops continue to come together, it becomes a mighty sea of change in our world. And so let's sing it together. And may we all go forth from this place with hope and possibility. And all God's people said together, amen. I hope you can stay for a coffee hour, and feel free to chat with Mike afterwards.